Having just finished the second season of Jujutsu Kaisen and not wanting to be spoiled by the fandom anymore, I immediately went on to binge the manga. And as I read chapter after chapter after chapter, I slowly came to the realization of something weird. Now, what I'm about to say might upset some of you watching, but Jujutsu Kaisen and Demon Slayer kind of do the same thing. Okay, before I get into what exactly I meant by that, I have to give a heads up. There will be major spoilers for all of the Shibuya arc, as well as very minor spoilers for the manga. So, you have been warned. I'm a huge fan of Jujutsu Kaisen. I followed the second season religiously and joined the internet to make noise about it, episode after episode. It was an amazing experience with a lot of moments that really stuck to me. But once the hype was finally done with and the dust had settled, I started to really think about it. And I realized that I wasn't as emotionally invested in the story as I thought I was. Something that became clearer as I went on to read the manga. JJK does a lot of great things, its action being the most standout part, but when I really started to pull down the layers, aside from Yuji and a few other characters, I found it really hard connecting to them and the story as a whole. Jujutsu Kaisen brings in all sorts of great characters with amazing personalities. The moment a character shows up on screen, they have such great presence and energy that you find yourself being drawn to them for one reason or the other. They show up, captivate you, barely show up again, and when they finally do, there's a high chance that they will suffer one of two fates. Either get written off with hundreds of chapters going by without them ever having a name drop, or die. Sometimes I wondered which was the better fate. It was a pattern that became all too apparent to me as the story went on. And this created a problem where I found it hard to be invested in any character that wasn't Yuji or Megumi. I approached Jujutsu Kaisen with incredible caution, not because I wanted to avoid being heartbroken when a character I really like eventually died, but because I didn't see a point in connecting to these characters if they were going to eventually die or just disappear. It was low-key kind of frustrating. Why should I care? Was a question I kept asking myself as the story went on. Why should I care about a character's backstory or internal monologue if you're going to forcefully take them away from me before I had the time to really get used to them? Why should I care about the relationships the characters have with each other when I haven't seen much of their dynamics on screen? Why should I care about the overly complicated curse technique being explained to me in a fight that is honestly just there for spectacle's sake? This made me, and I'm sure a lot of you too, lose a bit of trust in Gege when it came to the way they handled their characters. This is also the first time I've seen such a vocal part of the fandom have so much malice for their respective author. I mean, for goodness sakes, wasn't there someone out there that wanted to actually hire an assassin to take out the author because of a certain character's death? And yeah, I know this is just a bit of the fandom that doesn't reflect on the entire fandom as a whole, but come on, the anti-Gege agenda is a bit too much. But I can sort of understand the sentiment behind it. We don't get to spend enough time with the characters to enjoy them. Which is why I'm part of the group that thinks that an arc before the Shibuya incident would have been pretty nice to have. This problem becomes really apparent going into the Culling Games arc, where a bunch of new characters get introduced at the cost of pushing out a majority of the older cast to becoming nothing more than cameos or reactors. And the ones that do stay in to join in on the action get bodied incredibly hard. It was really disappointing. The cast bloat made it hard for me to actually care about all the characters as a whole. But the biggest disappointment for me was the fact that Todo becomes almost non-existent after the Shibuya arc. Like, it doesn't make any sense why he doesn't get so much as a single panel or even a mention in the story. We don't know what happens to him after the Shibuya arc, and it's frustrating as hell. So you mean to tell me that a guy like Todo wouldn't rush to Yuji's side upon hearing that the suspension of his execution has been revoked? I call BS. And the fact that Todo and Choso never interact is such wasted potential, I tell ya. It makes me sad and kind of angry. The Culling Games arc really makes things unfair. Yeah, there were some really great characters to come from it, Higuruma being my favorite, but a lot of the new characters we meet were mostly antagonists with the sole purpose of bringing us more action. Like, as cool as the fight between Megumi and the coupon hobo guy was, it felt longer than it needed to be. All of this, coupled with the fact that the series was going from fight to fight, meant that there really wasn't any time for me to slow down and take in what had just happened. At the start of the video, I said that Demon Slayer and JJK kind of do the same thing, yeah? But what is that? Well, it's the shoehorning of backstories just before a character dies in an attempt to drum up some sympathy from the audience. A trope that brought Demon Slayer under a lot of fire during its run. But JJK has done the same thing on several occasions, that the moment a character's backstory shows up, viewers are already on edge expecting the worst case scenario. Like, I won't lie, they really did my girl Angel dirty. But to its credit, it doesn't try to give every antagonist a tragic backstory and commits to making them the worst of the worst. Some people are just evil because they can. It feels like the series is way more focused in showing me the next high spectacle fight and getting me hyped more than, telling me a story. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that there isn't a story in JJK, it just feels like the action to storytelling ratio is very uneven. I'd say 5-2, and this was really glaring in the second season, especially in the Shibuya arc. Not the hidden inventory arc though, that had the perfect blend of both, making it my favorite arc in the series. The Shibuya arc hits you fast and hits you hard, without giving you time to chill. This was something that worked really well on a week-to-week viewing basis, but after binging the second season all over again, I came to better understand the problem I had with it. It suffers from something I'd like to call hype decay. Now, let me explain. After being hit with hype after hype after hype, episode after episode, each instance of hype will slowly begin to hit less and less when you don't really have a moment to slow down and ruminate on the experience. Like, too much of a good thing will ruin it, you know what I mean? I'm sure there's a proper term for this, but I'm dumb and this sounds way cooler, so I'll just stick to calling it hype decay. It isn't something exclusive to JJK, as the aforementioned Demon Slayer does the same thing too, but slightly worse. It ends up making the whole watch through pretty exhausting, as you wish for an ounce of downtime just to collect yourself. Like, I really miss the end of episode gags that were in the first season, which actually helped to characterize the cast better, but I guess that couldn't exactly work considering the tone of the second season. In my personal viewing experience with JJK Season 2, my hype peaked at Yuji vs Choso, and then Yuji vs Mahito. Why? Because these were fights that had personal stakes and emotions in them, leading to actual character development in Yuji. Up until this point, JJK had been presenting us with a story that felt like Yuji had no business being in. Viewers would often joke about how he's a side character in his own story because, as far as shonen goes, Yuji doesn't do a whole lot of the things expected of a shonen MC. It feels like whether or not Yuji was put into the world of Jujutsu sorcery, nothing would have really changed, and this is something Yuji himself has come to accept. In the fight with Choso, we see him come to terms with the fact that he's not the main character and he doesn't have to be the one to rescue Gojo, who had just been sealed. His only goal at the moment was taking down Choso so that everyone else would get ahead. It's not exactly a healthy mindset, as we see him more than ready to accept death, while at the same time calling himself nothing but a cog in the machine. His development throughout the series has been one of my favorites all across anime, and I can't wait to see what becomes of him at the end of the series. Then there was Yuji vs Mahito, where I was the most emotionally invested in, mostly because of the overwhelming hate I have for Mahito. I am still really salty about what he did to Junpei. But also, this fight really went on to further develop Yuji as a character, challenging some of the ideals he previously had. You could really feel the struggle in all of these, but for the rest, they were pretty meh. Spectacle aside, like that whole fight with Dagon that I forget actually happened because Toji stole the show. But despite all the problems I have with the series, I still really enjoy it. I keep coming back to it because there's just a lot of fun parts to be had. Like the fights. Yes, I sound really hypocritical right now, but I have no shame. The fights are never dull and they almost always deliver. Sure, I'm not emotionally invested in them, but they're still fun in all their overcomplicated chaos. The Culling Games really makes things extra with all sorts of curse techniques that vary in crazy effects. There's a lot of creativity in them. In fact, these fights are like on the same level of creativity as the fights in JoJo's Part 3 and onwards, ass pulls included. Though the only person that ever really does ass pulls is this fraud. Yeah, I'm on that anti-Sukuna agenda too. Gege has really planned out the whole cursed energy power system, though I feel like it's way more complicated than it needs to be, but then again, I guess the explanations that go into them are an art form in their own way. Fights aside, the series is also great at building up its story, being able to somehow make every minor detail about certain characters and plot points pay off, and it's able to pull this off consistently so nothing ever feels random or out of the moment. It's one that really rewards the viewers for paying attention, which is really nice. Though if you've been hit by the reading comprehension devil, then it's going to make understanding a few of the plot points kind of hard. In the end, JJK is honestly a mixed bag for me. I do have parts I love, but at the same time really don't like. But I guess that's what love is, right? But let me know what you guys think about Jujutsu Kaisen and the story so far. I'd love to hear from you all in the comments below. This has been your very favorite slice of bread. Stay toasty.